Good morning, good afternoon. I hope you're able to see the slides. As a former regulator, as well as somebody who has been involved with artificial intelligence powered regulatory intelligence tool development, I have seen firsthand how AI is shaping how you know how regulatory professionals can navigate through complex topics, databases, searches. And today we have the honor of exploring how AI can, in fact, augment regulatory decision making and forming the strategy for new product development. A brief additional housekeeping rules. Today's webinar is being recorded, and I think a link will be provided at a later time to all of us. And we really invite your comments and questions. So please locate the chat box on your screen, which Eric mentioned to you already. And then if you have any technical issues, please feel free to reach to him. And we would really appreciate any feedback from the webinar at the end of this webinar. And you can use this scan code to follow us on LinkedIn for updates. Now, with respect to the agenda, um, I'm going to provide some introductory remarks about artificial intelligence and how it can help regulatory intelligence, broadly speaking. Then we're going to have a conversation with our expert, Meredith Brown Tuttle, followed by a Q&A session and some closing remarks. So she and I, Meredith and I, would be talking about this topic to mainly pick a super duper expert in this area, Meredith's experience and her perspective on how AI can augment regulatory intelligence. So if we take a step back, and then we 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 want to put a premise on what regulatory professionals do. um, they do more than tracking guidelines or news updates and so on. They, in fact, regulatory professionals do some of the most challenging tasks in pharmaceutical companies and other research organizations. They start by collecting data, and the data comes in all kinds of shapes and forms. They organize and categorize these data based upon geographic regions or product categories or market segments for competitive analysis to be presented to their drug development teams. Then they perform a contextual analysis to identify trends, growth patterns, competitive insights using benchmarking, how one region is pairing with another or one company with another, and so on, so that they can use that to gain insights in how to position their product in the market and how they should develop that product to be competitive. Finally, all this culminates into the ability for regulatory professionals such as ourselves to perform predictive modeling to foresee what might be coming, and scenario planning. What happens if option one happens versus option two? Are we prepared, and how do we risk mitigate that risk, a regulatory risk, through the development process? So here, with this kind of a basic premise of how we work for regulatory intelligence, and and information is only increasing, and it is increasing in leaps and bounds. And so subject matter expertise is inevitable for us to achieve these goals for a regulatory intelligence professional. Now let us see how artificial intelligence might help. So artificial intelligence, just so for completeness, it is basically the capability of machines to act like humans. So to think, reason, learn from experience, and problem solving. If you look at the different technologies that are available within the umbrella of AI, you have traditional engineering. This is basically how do you extract data from heterogeneous sources, so you can automate it, you can scale up in terms of how fast you can do that. Then natural language processing is used to extract signal from these documents. So it is one of the technologies under artificial intelligence. Then you have machine learning, which can learn from data, improve over time, meaning you keep doing something over and over, the machine learns your pattern and tries to emulate that in the future tasks. And deep learning, which is to show the machine the right answers and then make it develop an algorithm that can now be used to predict, for example, in this case, an upcoming regulatory trend eventually. And then Gen AI is a very good friend to us, which will help us to create documents, reports on the fly, such that the burden on creating these documents, images, tables, and so on is minimized, and we can expend our effort more to use our expertise to fine tune these documents that we can then share to the with the teams. So all in all, there will be time savings, increased accuracy, then automated regulatory reports, then expedited tailored training for new RI professionals. Somebody who's coming into this field can be easily trained using AI, better surveillance of regulatory landscape, more reliable, monitoring, and forecast upcoming regulatory changes. So with that, I'm going to invite Meredith to give a brief background about herself, and then I'm going to pepper her with some questions, and let's see. Looking forward to learning from her experience and perspective. Meredith?
Oh, thank you very much for having me and inviting me today. I really appreciate it. So if anyone's heard me speak before, I talk way too fast, and I really apologize for that. But please put any questions in the chat, and we'll try to address those. I've spent 34 years in the industry now. I worked every job except for CMC in drug and device and biologic. And I guess I always had the improv sort of motto to say yes to everything. You need something? Sure, I can do it. I can figure it out. And I was lucky enough to my first job in industry, someone said, here, I need you to sit down and program in SAS and program in Unix. I'd never done that before, but I figured that out.
So, Meredith, if we can start by discussing what is regulatory intelligence in your opinion, and how does it help to set regulatory strategy?
Okay, so I guess we'll go to the definition. So in 2006, the DIA Regulatory Intelligence Network Group got together and we sat down and we struggled with, well, what is regulatory intelligence? I think I know what regulatory intelligence is, but and everyone had ideas what they thought regulatory intelligence was. So this is the definition we sort of came to an agreement on. It's the act of gathering and analyzing publicly available regulatory information. This includes communicating the implications of that information, monitoring the current regulatory environment for opportunities to shape future regulations, guidance, policy, and legislation. One thing I want to make clear that it's publicly available information. It's publicly available information all around the world. It's not, and it can be competitive information, but it's not espionage. It's not going in and stealing information from companies' proprietary data set. So regulatory intelligence provides a team with a creative strategy for a product. It creates a development plan. It answers questions. You look at past precedent. You look at how people have done things. You look at the guidance. You look holistically at the regulatory landscape, how people have done things before, what your guardrails are, and come to a plan on how you can address the question at hand, how you can address strategy. It's basically your set of tools that you take from question to question to question to start really helping companies position their strategy. And then, of course, the next thing is, what is strategy? Oh, no, it's not. It's how I transform it. Okay. So the funnel diagram that you showed at the very beginning, Joga, is sort of how I do regulatory intelligence. I get a question. I get put together a strategy for a company. I'm going to research the topic. I'm going to read everything that I can. I'm going to cull just the information I need. I'm going to summarize that. I'm then going to analyze that. And in analyzing information, I'm transforming it into intelligence. I gather the information and transform it, like in your funnel diagram, into intelligence that's actionable for the team, I hope. So, I've always said, yes, I can figure this out. And usually I have the tools and the network and the resources to try to figure things out for people. I didn't realize that I was doing regulatory strategy for a long time. I really struggled with what was regulatory strategy. So in sitting down and writing an article in 2005, I said, well, I'd like to define what regulatory strategy is. So first thing I did was go to the dictionary, and Merriam-Webster defined strategy as an adaptation or complex of adaptations that serves or appears to serve an important function in achieving evolutionary success. Well, in regulatory, evolutionary success is getting, your IND or your CTA submitted, and then getting your NDA or marketing authorization application submitted. So what you do to go from an idea to actually into humans and actually into a marketing application, that's regulatory strategy. So regulatory strategy encompasses the drug development plan, the clinical development plan, the clinical endpoints, your non-clinical plan, what you're going to do for non-clinical, what you aren't going to do for non-clinical. It's the country-specific regulations and guidance, what you need to get started with a clinical trial in a country, what you need for a marketing application in a country, the past precedents, the guidance documents. It's any issues or questions that come up. It's how you're going to triage regulatory feedback that you got that doesn't necessarily work for you. It's looking at competitor information as well.
So if I may ask a question here, for example, about the clinical endpoints and competitor information, could you give us an example of what you might look for in terms of endpoints?
Sure. So I think that in endpoints, if there's a guidance document, so if I'm doing a diabetes drug, I don't have to go research clinicaltrials.gov. I don't have to look at journal articles. I go right to the guidance document and I pull out what the FDA wants for that. When I'm researching rare disease or working with rare diseases, sometimes there's a guidance document, but not always. So that means going in and looking at what competitors are doing on clinicaltrials.gov. If I have other tools like Trial Trove or some other tools available to me that I can look to see what competitors are doing that are still in the IND space or still in development space versus the approved space, I can go look at endpoints there. And then I'll sort of summarize them and put them together and present them to the team of here's what people are doing. So, established diseases are much easier. Rare diseases are really where your expertise as a regulatory intelligence professional, regulatory analyst, regulatory strategist really come into play, because you've got to figure out what are other people doing, what does the literature say, what are the KOLs saying, are the clinical endpoints that you need to research and you need to pull together to help your team plan for phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3.
Thank you. So, and what would be the typical sources of the information for regulatory professionals?
So, again, I started out in 2000 in regulatory, and my toolbox then was the burgeoning internet. It was sometimes still, I had to fax, request guidance documents. So my toolbox back then was very different than the toolbox it is now. And again, my toolbox keeps evolving and changing. 2010, it was a whole bunch of checklists with a whole bunch of websites that I could go to. And now it's, large language models such as ChatGPT or Claude or RegChat and VivPro. And so, it's changed over time. So where I find regulatory information, it's not found in one place. You have to have a toolbox. You need numerous sleuthing techniques in your armamentarium to address the questions posed, and you need a starting place. So again, you need a friend. There are questions. I should back up. What I love about regulatory is that I'm 25 years in, and I still don't know everything. I still get questions from like, wow, okay, I didn't think about that. All right, well, I've got some common sense experience that I can apply that to it, but then I need to go research the question. I need to figure out past precedent. I need to go figure out there are guidance documents, and then I need to phone a friend, so to speak, and I need to say, hey, this is what I'm like dealing with. Have you ever dealt with that before? So again, every problem or every question or issue is different, and that's what makes this exciting. So I always have a toolbox, and that toolbox is constantly evolving and changing. Here's just some of the sources I have, and again, I've got multiple checklists. I've got websites that I use on a regular basis, and now I have the LLMs. And I just want to give the warning, because I have to give this warning about large language models, or LLMs. They're really great to start and to think about. And if you want to write a novel over the weekend, they're really great to help write that novel over the weekend. But they lie. And so you can't trust the information. They're a good way to start thinking about the information and to start positioning the information, but you can't trust anything that's coming out of them. They're out of date. They make up things when they don't understand what the question is, and um, they just don't have current information, and they're not a regulatory strategist, and they're not thinking about things. I know people will go to them and say, well, this is, I have a table that I update constantly, because inevitably every week I get asked, we want to start a clinical trial in 60 different countries. What are the regulatory requirements, and how can we get there, and then how long does it take? People have started going to LLMs, and they'll ask that question, Joga. And the problem with that is that they'll get that regulatory information, and it's not intelligence, it's information, and they'll think it's accurate. But it's not. It lies, but people think they've gotten the right answer. So again, this goes back to having a tool where it's valid, the information is validated, and you can trust the output is really important. And another thing, I just have to give this warning as well, is that with large language models, do not upload any confidential information. I'll upload to Claude parts of a summary basis of approval, ask it to summarize it for me, but you cannot upload any client confidential information or any company confidential information, because it becomes part of the training data set. Someone can come along, ask about your product, and it will provide it to you. And I know some instances where people have done that, and it's kind of scary.
Yeah. So my own experience being in this field is that when you contain, like you alluded to, when you contain a large language model to a database that the experts deem relevant, then the accuracy of the search results are actually phenomenal. That is what we have found, and that's something we take it very seriously, and have proven that over time. So we completely agree with that being tamed. It has to be tamed.
Yep.
And how did you, if I may ask, so we can inspire other regulatory professionals, how did you build your expertise in regulatory intelligence?
So I have to say, thanks to my mom, actually. My mom always taught me to think in options. She would say, well, here's your problem. What are your options? Give me three. And so I always had to like tell her what my three options were, because she didn't ever want me to think that didn't have options. So I just, I would go into every place that I worked, and they'd say, we need this done. And I'd say, sure, I'll do it. Well, one day I got someone asking me, well, we want the vitreous humor of a human compared to a dog, compared to a horse, compared to an elephant. And we'd like that done because we want to go into animal health with this product, because we think we can get into animal health before we can get into human health. I said, sure, I'll figure it out. And sure enough, I did. I researched, I did the literature, and pretty soon I became the person you went to ask questions to. So I just started answering the questions, and everyone kept asking me, and I started figuring out, okay, I'm getting the same question. So I started writing it down, and because I had the database experience, I put together a relational database, And so it's just always saying yes and always trying to figure it out and not being afraid to dig down to that 15th page of Google or Google Gemini now and just looking and asking questions and then going back to the person who asked you the question and say, hey, is this what you meant? Or is this not what you meant? So it's being open to asking lots of questions.
And what might be some of the typical questions a regulatory intelligence professional might need to be prepared to answer?
Oh gosh, you need to be prepared to answer just about anything, Joka. So again, I said that I get that question about we're starting clinical trials in 10 countries, or starting clinical trials in 142 countries. Give us a list of everything that needs to be, in the regulatory filing or in the ethics committee filing, and how long it's going to take, because everyone wants to get there faster. And I'm bold in my regulatory strategy. I want to get there faster as well. But some of the questions I get are, who else has this clinical indication? What was their pathway? What are the endpoints? What are their typical development issues? They have their issues, but how can we be different? Manufacturing, quality, inspection outcomes. What are the non-clinical studies conducted? What is the pending legislation and recently passed legislation? And again, I just want to put a thing in here. You cannot use large language models to do your monitoring and surveillance. They're out of date. So you have to have other tools to do that. What is the strategy? What is the pathway development and past precedent? I use that a lot. What are their competitor labeling claims? Hot topics that come up, and any other thing that happens to come up on the team. Because as you're sitting on a team developing a drug, there are lots of questions that come up. And so for me, that's always the fun part. It's like, oh, let me go figure that out. Let me do that. So that's all about it. So I get this question about once a quarter. And so I have a tool that I've set up where I have all the different breakthrough table. I have a table of all the different breakthroughs, a table of all the different fast tracks, a table of all the orphan drugs that have been approved for a while now, because I get asked this. So inevitably, I have a client that comes along and they say, we have $20 million. We haven't done any non-clinical testing yet. And we would like to go through phase 2 accelerated approval, lay out the plan for that to happen. And I'm like, well, if it's, insert your indication here, right? But typically right now it's oncology. I'm like, okay, so you have an oncology. Do you want to be fourth line? Like, no, we want to be first line. I'm like, okay, well, that market's sort of saturated if you're going into, breast or prostate. And so it's a matter of, taking what the client goals are for this pathway and figuring out what's there and what's not there, what the safety database needs to be, what the clinical endpoints are. But so anyway, so inevitably they come back and say, we want to get breakthrough, we want to get accelerated approval. So it's my job to put together this table, look at what are the endpoints that were used for the different people that have gotten breakthrough, what is their safety database, and try to like give that to them. So I've used lots of tools to do this. I just have a manual table that I put together and that I've used for a long time. But I've used LLMs to try to see if they can give me anything different. I've used Reg Chat to do this, but VivPro did produce the best results for me on this. So I know that you want to show your. So how can I do this? I
So,
did. Go ahead.
so given the topic du jour is about how AI can augment regulatory intelligence.
Right.
If you were to if we can play a little bit of you can play a role, two different roles. How would you get this information? For example, you wanted to list of products that received breakthrough designation. How would you do it without AI? And then I'm going to ask you, how would you do it with AI?
Yeah. So the old school way of doing it was, before I put together all my tables, was you looked at press releases to see, you look at past precedent of products, but you'd have to go look at every product for that year that was approved to see if they had breakthrough or not breakthrough. You would triage that or triangulate that with looking at press releases. So I do a general Google search on breakthrough, get a list of press releases that people put out, then go pull their SBAs and look at that. Then Friends of Cancer started putting together a table of products that received breakthrough or fast track. Then CEDAR started putting out a list every year of all the products that were approved, and they broke them down by orphan, breakthrough, accelerated, fast track. So that's sort of the modern way to go get that information manually. So using RIA, you put that information in with AI. So this is with an AI tool. And specifically, if I wanted to look just for melanoma breakthrough designations, I could create this table within RIA. And it's available, I don't know, it took about 10 seconds, maybe at most. So the information that took me hours of looking through press releases or looking at CBER's reports for past years, I can do in 10 seconds. And not only that, but I put together an article with someone in 2003 where I looked at all the triangulation of orphan and breakthrough wasn't around at the time, but orphan and fast track and accelerated approval. And I put together this triangulation, and it took hours to do that. But not only can I look at the table output, I can then look at, what products by year were approved, and then also, how many days it took for the filing, and who got fast track, who got orphan, who got breakthrough, who got accelerated. So this information is available instantaneously. So when I started back in 2000, this would have taken hours of digging, and now it's just really available if you have the right tool.
And this information is going to help you set the strategy, the development strategy as well as registration strategy for your new product.
Absolutely, it will. And it will help guide decision making as well. And especially with, then you can go off from here and you can look at what were the ends in each of the trials, look at the clinical development plan, look at, how long the trials took, look at the endpoints to really help set the whole strategy for that product. But more importantly, I want to say that with AI developed tools, I can get answers a lot quicker than the old school way of manually digging and putting things together. And for me, that's a big boon.
So to build on the again showcasing the power of AI, um, if you were to have a summary of the summary based approval, how would we do it with and without AI?
Sure. Well, so the summary basis of approval, again, over time, I set up a format for the information that I thought was critical, pulling out from any summary basis of approval or EPAR for that matter. And so that sort of table has changed over time, and the requirements have changed over time of what I think is strategically important to share with the team. So it used to be very manual. It would take, 5 to 20 hours, depending on the SBA and what it contained. And then so as soon as, Chat GPT exploded, I was asking it questions about summary basis of approval. Well, at that time, you couldn't upload documents to Chat GPT, so it wasn't very useful. Claude came along, and I have to say I'm biased. I really like Claude a lot, and I pay for the monthly subscription of Claude and build platforms on Claude. But it allowed me to upload documents. So for me, the first thing I did was, upload an SBA. Well, it was too big. So I had to cut down the SBA and I'd upload it to Claude and I'd say, hey, summarize this for me. But again, it's not perfect. It's a large language model. It does summarize things, but it doesn't usually give me the level of detail that I want or need for my team. That's how I do it, alone and with the AI tools that are, free or inexpensive. So if I want to use AI to augment me putting together the summary basis of approval, I would type that into RIA. So Joka, one thing real quick. There's some questions in the chat that came through about how up to date is RIA and how many countries does RIA cover? I thought you might want to.
Yes. Thank you. So I was just waiting for a good opportunity to not break the flow, but thank you for bringing this up. There are two questions here. How up to date is RIA? RIA is updated every midnight, just in general. And then when there is a new product approved in any of the countries, from US all the way to Australia and every country, continent in between. The documents are available within 48 hours after they're available on their website, the regulatory website, and irrespective of the language the documents exist in. Um,
Okay. So the
and
reason,
there are global, you know, yeah. So then we have um, one of our colleagues who responded with the list of countries that are included in RIA. So,
so the
Meredith,
reason,
back to
yeah,
you.
the reason why I wanted to transition to that and bring that up was theoretically,
Yeah.
and this is theoretically, that as soon as an SBA is uploaded and I want to go in and look at it, I could put together, if it's approved in multiple countries, the summary basis of approval, the comparison of the summary basis approval across all the different countries it's approved in, and take a look at, what was the basis of approval, what were the endpoints, and how long it took to get approval, and then how long the clinical trials were, and all the key elements that I need from an SBA. Do you want to go to
So,
the next slide? Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
go
Go ahead.
ahead, please.
No, this is just showing more detail. I don't know if you want to expand on this, but this is showing additional detail that can come out of RIA, instantly or fairly instantly, to show you, to help you put together your summary basis of approval, um, uh, package that you can present to a team.
Yeah. And Meredith, would you agree that this kind of information and kind of summarizing, so to say, the key elements would be a fruitful topic for a drug development team to discuss when framing the strategy for your own new product?
Absolutely. And not only that, but what I like is there's graphics.
Uh,
So when I have to tailor every presentation to who I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to C-level, it's a different presentation than when I'm talking to the development team than when I'm actually talking to regulatory. With regulatory teams, it can be information dense, it can be link dense, and it tells the whole story. When it's the development team, it's, pictures and really high level concise. And then when I'm dealing with C-level, it's even more concise, but still the pretty pictures are really great, and I need the pictures to help communicate the story. And that's one thing I really like, is dealing with data and presenting data
yeah,
in ways that people can easily understand.
outstanding. So, and then um, again, you did mention in the beginning of the talk that competitive intelligence and comparing different products, what different companies have done, is important and a routine question that regulatory intelligence professionals would get. So this is a case where if you wanted to compare a label to set your own strategy, how would we go about it, before AI?
So before AI, but during the time of the internet, because I've seen the whole span, right? And I've seen everything grow, and it's been just a really great time to be alive and to be a professional, to begin to grow and change. Is, I'd go to the FDA website, I'd go to, EMA website, and I'd download the labels. And then I would manually put together and pull in, this is the section and this is how they compare. And so that's how I do it, manually. And then my foray into AI, it would be, okay, I'd upload everything into Claude, because you can do that, and then ask it to produce a table for me. So I'd ask it to produce a table comparing the labels and comparing the sections. But again, I always have to double check the work. So it would put it together for me, like when I summarize a guidance document, it can summarize a guidance document for me, but I have to check its work, because I can't trust, I have to validate the output.
Yeah, and
So
then
that's how I do that.
okay, and then you'll have to do it regularly because there may be updates in labels, and so you have to repeat this whole process again, I guess.
That is correct, right? And so I would, if things change and I don't necessarily know that things have changed, I'd have to go back and recheck the website, all the different websites where I pull the labels from, to make sure that I'm dealing with the current label.
Yeah. So now we'll flip and then talk about how can we do this in the era of artificial intelligence.
Okay. So I can ask your tool to do the exact same thing for me, and I can look at it across the US. I can look at it in Europe. This is what the example is. I can look at the most recent labels. I can look at the older label compared to a newer label, and it will put together on the right side. There's this output where it really shows me readily not only what the differences are between the EU and the US, then also I can summarize it. Now, I just have to say real quick that the reason why you do this label analysis is because you're looking for, okay, so it's the same study that's conducted, right? It's a global trial that's conducted, but what are the claims that are different between what the US FDA gave someone versus what the EMA gave them? Is the EMA indication broader? Were they allowed to have a different claims or bigger claims? Because all this goes into advertising and promotion and ultimately, marketing. So I want to think about looking at competitor labels, what claims we can ultimately make, and then how that's going to change our clinical trial or our clinical endpoints that we currently have. So this is great. This is available like in seconds again, right? It doesn't, have me going through and looking at everything. It just provides it very quickly.
Yeah.
And then again, go ahead. Why don't you talk about this
Yeah.
example,
So
what it can provide?
So again, just building on the power of AI, how it can augment regulatory intelligence, is compared to pre-AI, where you had to do everything manually and you have to do it every time you need an answer. Here, AI can be used to not only compare labels side by side, but it is also can be used to uh, have a conversation like Meredith, you and I are having a conversation now. You can have a conversation using Gen AI about, for example, one could ask, create a table of the study design of a particular clinical trial, and there you go. It creates this kind of a table that then can be discussed with your drug team, even clinical ops, to make sure that to forecast how long the trial recruitment and so on will take place. And you can also say, ask for, please summarize the top 5 adverse events for this product. And again, you can use that for differentiating your product from the competitors. Any additional comments on that, Meredith?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
And this covers to cover the chat. This is human medicine, not veterinary. Rhea is human,
Yes.
not veterinary. Yep.
Yeah. And devices as well. Um, and it does have CMC. Somebody asked a question about CMC. And then now, if we get into a little bit more exotic topics, pediatric global commitments. This, in my own experience, Meredith, there is always a something upfront one has to discuss the pediatric plan, because um, most regulatory agencies insist on showing your plans as early as possible. So given that, if we were to explore how to analyze competitors' pediatric drug, global commitment plans, how would we do it with and without, or without AI and with AI?
So, that people publish, and the EMA and PEDCO publishes what the agreed upon PIP was. It's really great. So you can see, what people committed to, what they didn't commit to, because then that sets the bar for what you have to do. But oftentimes, if you're in a space where there's a lot of people who've already gone through the PIP process, you want to be able to rapidly look at what they got, what they were allowed to do versus not allowed to do, so that you can then set the precedent. Now, for the US, I'm going to have to go through and I'm going to have to look at all of the summary basis of approvals and dig through that, unless someone's done a review article for me. So, this is a very manual process where you pull the information, you read the information. I can ask an LLM, but it's probably gonna lie to me. So then that's what I do without AI, Joga.
All right.
All right. So using RIA. So now this is a melanoma example. So I pretty much figured with melanoma there would be some waiver that'd be allowed. But it told me right away, it summarized all the different things that have been approved in the EMA, and it let me know right away that my thinking about strategy was that I would be allowed to get a waiver from 12 and under. It validated that for me. So I didn't have to go through all the approved PIPs summaries that were on the EMA website, and it basically gave this to me that that's what had been done before.
So, Meredith, just to add my 2 cents to it, given the new regulations in terms of the pediatric requirements for oncology products, where the indication could be different in pediatrics compared to adults, this type of information, I would say, would be critical for the development teams across the world to be prepared on how to handle it in US versus Europe versus somewhere else in the world.
Completely agree.
Cool. And then, I would like to switch gears a little bit and then talk about um, uh, the interaction or the role of AI in from a regulatory professional's point of view. So, how would you think if you have to summarize, AI would augment um, a regulatory intelligence professional's productivity?
So I think a lot of people are really afraid of AI, and I know that that's something you want to bring up later, but I'm really, because of being doing programming and being used to doing databases and just being into the data and loving data, I just automatically, when I worked for an AI drug discovery company at the time that ChatGPT blew up, but at the same time, I've just always embraced the new technology. I want to try new things. I want to see how people are doing things different. And then I turn around and I train and teach that, because I want to pull everyone along with me into the future. And in terms of technology, I think right now, the AI revolution is kind of here. You need to embrace it. You need to embrace AI tools to augment, all of your regulatory activities. And there's just a wave of things coming that's really going to augment your job, so that you're going to be allowed to do that critical thinking, and then the everyday like routine submission things are going to be taken care of, but then you can use AI to help give you that information so you can develop the intelligence, and just jump in and explore it. So I think, the intersection of AI and regulatory is still in its infancy. We're still working some things out. I mean, there's lots of drug development tools for all disciplines that's increasing to reduce errors and waste. Things are not fully automated yet. You still need a human. And the biggest impact right now is in drug development and biologic development. That space has just grown up, like just exploded. I think we're going to see a consolidation in that area. But the furthest along in AI and AI tools is really right now safety, pharmacovigilance. And then coming up right behind it is generative AI for writing regulatory documents, which I think is fantastic. Something that can write the first draft for me so that I can go in and strategically position and not have to worry about making sure that all the tables and information it pulled data from are correct and accurate. And I can sit down and focus on how I want to strategically write a document. It's phenomenal.
And there was a question related to that, and my colleague Praveen answered it. The ability to generate documents first drafts is really a blessing in my opinion.
Especially for clinical study reports.
Yeah.
So when Jay and I have an article coming out about like all the different generative AI writing tools that are coming out. So again, our profession is very time intensive. The for free tools are helpful, but again, they're not validated and they make data up. The for fee tools create more time savings, I think. And when AI works, it makes things go faster, and I'm able to get more things done in a day. And I don't know about you, but I have a to-do list, and the more I can cross off and feel like that I've given someone a really good product and good intelligence and good analysis, that makes my day. I love being able to provide answers and intelligence. So again, I think everyone should embrace augmented, intelligence for regulatory intelligence.
Yeah. You kind of touched on this, Meredith, that the I have heard some RA professionals expressing um, a concern if our jobs are going to be substituted by machines. If you can, if you have
Sure.
any additional comments on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been in this industry for so long. I've seen when people were fearful that electronic publishing was going to put them out of their jobs. Well, it didn't put them out of their jobs. Their job evolved and changed. So the people who were doing all the copying and all the making tabs, jobs evolved into formatting and publishing electronically. Our jobs are going to evolve. That is true. And again, you need to embrace the intelligence, the regulatory intelligence tools. You need to embrace AI. Um, and we need to then all collectively work to move these tools forward, and our jobs will change. But then if you want to go the next slide, because the next slide I think is really important, that people need to realize that regulatory is reading the tea leaves, making common sense decision. At this time, you cannot train AI unless you have a huge data set for the gray, right? It's black and white, zeros and ones. Regulatory is the gray. It's your experience, it's common sense, applying it to a new situation. So I think that we need people who have depth of experience. We need you there. We need you there to make common sense decisions. We need you there present at the table to say, no, that's what ChatGPT says, but that's not correct because it doesn't have, the level of experience. Because AI misses nuances. So your deep experience matters. And I'm very much, and I've said this before, I don't believe in Terminator. I don't believe the AI Terminator revolution is coming. I think this is really going to greatly enhance our ability to make decisions, our ability to get there faster. And I have a lot of confidence in where we're going in the future.
Yeah. And if I may add, my own thoughts on this topic. Um, Regulatory professionals have this phenomenal breadth of experience across multiple facets of drug development, all the way from, I would say, the end of discovery and uh, to post-marketing and life cycle management. They are responsible for all these different activities. And for us to be empowered with um, uh, knowledge and information, knowledge, and then intelligence about the regulatory landscape, I would I would submit that we are going to be more invaluable to the drug development teams than before, because we have conquered now through these novel technologies how to get accurate information rapidly. In fact, I would say you can even access some of this information in a live meeting to answer questions right there and then. So to me, it actually makes regulatory professionals a lot more deep, the teams dependent on them than before.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think that, well, yeah, sorry, I had several thoughts
Yeah, yeah, please go
on
ahead.
that. Um, yeah, I really think that yeah, our experience matters. And again, like you said, it'd be really great to be in a live meeting and be able to answer those questions in real time. Because if you can answer those questions in real time, the team can make decisions in real time. It's not, hey, let me get back to you. It's, hey, let's put this on the screen. Let's ask the questions. Let's discuss it. Let's discuss it. Let's bring everyone into the conversation so you can be that person to really lead that conversation.
Yeah. So with that, I would like to thank you, Meredith, and all the participants for a lively webinar on how AI can augment regulatory intelligence and how it may empower regulatory professionals even further. So with that, I would like to uh, offer you, Meredith, an opportunity for closing remarks.
No, just thank you for having me and thank you for developing the tool. I really enjoy using it. And it's something that, I really like having in my toolbox to be able to answer questions easier with validated data.
Yeah. And just to recap, through the different case studies and topics for discussion that we have gone through for this webinar, AI augments RI in multiple ways. One is the speed at which you can get the regulatory information to synthesize intelligence, and two, it is a lot more accurate and reproducible compared to human, uh, approaches. And then it also allows to perform forecasting of trends in terms of what might be coming in the near future, either regulation wise or policies and so on. So with that, uh, I I I would like to conclude this and see if there are any pressing questions from the audience that Meredith can address. One last chance.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions.
I'm just scrolling through to see if there were any unanswered. So, all right. So if no other questions, I'm going to turn it to Eric. If
Hi. Thank you very much. I just noticed another question coming in. Which regulatory agencies are developing guidance on use of AI?
Well, the US has it. The EU has really comprehensive guidance on it. So a lot of people, a lot of regulatory agencies are developing the use of AI and what the parameters are that they allow it to be used in.
Okay. And then there is another one called, do you have more advanced training for VivPro?
yes, so once once you subscribe to Wipro, you are um, you are provided uh, uh, training to start using the tool, then also to uh, make you an advanced user. So there is a constant interaction between Wipro folks and the clients. There are several um, tutorials that are available based on their own experience in terms of regulatory intelligence questions. So there is a variety of tools available for a user to master RIA.
So, Joga, there's two questions that came in. So I saw the regulatory agents question, like, yeah, I know the way the regulatory agents are gonna really, it's gonna be interesting in 5 years where we're at regulatory agents. But Matthew, to get to your question, I think that anytime you can take yourself into a different way of thinking, and you can program, or you can, you really don't need to learn how to use Python anymore. You can just go to ChatGPT and say, program me Python code for this, and then put it into your program. But if you can learn to think in data and how to take something and break it down into data points and think about how to analysis, I think that that's really important no matter what. I think any other tool you can bring to regulatory, in terms of critical thinking, in terms of logic, I think is really important.